It's 14 minutes after 7, and a lot of people kind of really like the inspirational piece, you know, father and son kind of thing. Charles from Kede, thank you very much for the nice things you say to us on WhatsApp. This one says, good morning, Roland. You've made my morning with the try again. Successful people keep moving. They make mistakes, but they don't quit. That's from Inusa from Salaga.
Very true.
That's my inspirational man right there.
Yeah.
Good morning to Israel Lai. If even he's home for finishing his 7 p.m. news yesterday. Ahmed in Tamale. Really? Okay, thanks for the message. This one says, watching your station's documentary about the Bimbala issue reiterates to some of us that our DCA and his NDC government is siding. Okay, that's not what the documentary sought to do. So if you were twisting it, don't expect me to read it. Good morning to you all. Thank God Walker is here this morning. Are you aware that an empty sack cannot stand? Let's all join hands to build a better Ghana for future generations. Let's talk less with more action. Our leaders talk a lot, which yield no productivity. Graduates are hungry. Mother Ghana, Allah have mercy on us. That's from Razak Halidu, Kofi.
I'm a graduate. I'm hungry.
Son of Honorable Charles Taylor. Really? Okay, so I'm reading a lot more of the messages that I couldn't read earlier. This one says, Marvi, try to understand what Roland said. If she crossed the road or not, that was the day Allah had planned to call her back to him. To him we belong, and to him we shall return. Ayo, mercy. This one from Dr. Abedi Inquada, so aka Big Joe Shoe, says, why is the BNI doing everything possible to incur the wrath of the silent opposition party and her sympathizers? I have no idea where this one is going this morning. This one says, please, if the EC boss hasn't finished with the process to change the logo, please tell her to stop. If not, the next commissioner will also try to change it. Let's imagine what will happen if one day we wake up to hear that a president wants to change the nation's coat of arms. Though change is coming, but it isn't change of logo. Mr. Apia in Doma sending us that WhatsApp message. This one says, good morning, Mama V and Roland. I'm always glad watching you two every morning on the show. I take a lot of inspiration from you. May the favor of the Lord be on you always. And that's from Prince Lotson Kafui at Hohoi. That's so touching. Thank you so much for your words. This one says, Roland always makes Mama V laugh a lot. Miss you guys, although you guys have stopped reading my messages. That's from Danny in Akosombo.
Oh, Danny, we just read your message.
It's been a while since you sent us yeah.
It shows that
I haven't read anything from you in a while.
Well, the truth is that we get a lot of bulk messages, so sometimes we just have to sift through, and if we're lucky, we get the ones that we will read, who usually also will be sending a lot more.
I refuse to.
We have to tell them what the truth.
It's not luck.
It's not, okay.
It's not luck.
It's not luck.
It's not.
But the thing is that we do it randomly.
Let me read Haruna.
Because otherwise it means we will be reading the messages of the same people all the time.
Yeah. You won't believe it, but I could read message for like an hour. If you want us to do that, say it. Then we dedicate an hour for the messages.
Yes.
Haruna in Naswan Yonyong constituency says we're looking good this morning, so we thank you so much. This one says, good morning, my great presenters. We should put a stop to nepotism and with the realities of life. God is on the wrong, Ghana is on the wrong foot from a while. Pao Busi on Tamale Salaga Road. I couldn't say God is on the wrong path.
No, never. If it
never,
did,
ever.
If it did, we have to smack you.
Yeah, this one says, when you don't give up, you cannot fail. Try everything. All these very inspirational. However, I like the female presenters were, oh, that's like me. I just told my wife to sew that style with her cloth. And that's from Muhammad in Tamale.
Have you seen the style?
You have to pay me for copyright.
You're seeing the style on TV. Yeah.
This person says that I need to change my name to Jetuba because you don't look like Mama. Did you get it?
Yeah, I get it.
Like Mama, but I like my Mama, like Mama V.
Yeah.
You know? This is Heyman from Pando in the Volta region. Roland, we have more messages that we will touch on, but let's get onto this other issue that we want to focus a little time on. And I'm picking this from yesterday's Ghanaian Times newspaper only picking it because you were not here. So just to refresh your mind. And this story was on another paper, I think yesterday. It says that government has begun an international tender process to select a private partner to operate the electricity company of Ghana on a concession for 25 years. A total of 46 power organizations, including about 20 Ghanaian companies, have so far expressed interest and submitted their document to the Millennium Development Authority for consideration. With the agreement, the private partner with a minimum net worth of $400 million is expected to invest in ECG and improve its operations to reduce commercial and technical losses, as well as minimize the frequency and duration of outages. The investor will enter into an agreement with ECG through the Ghana Power Compact 2 arrangement to have the exclusive right to operate, maintain, and carry out investment in the company for the 25-year period. The Chief Operating Officer of MIDA, Mr. Julius Kwekpena, disclosed this at a roadshow organized yesterday by MIDA. So this will be organized on Monday to manage, operate, and invest in ECG, the country's largest power distributor. So this is where we are now. We're told that there are a lot of foreign people who are interested in taking over ECG, Roland, quite a good number of them. But if you'd remember, particularly last year, ISODEC was very vocal. They're totally against any kind of privatization. And one of the things that I hear coming out of this is that, you know, ECG is responsible for rural electrification as well. But if the new person takes over, that will not be their responsibility. And they are free, their tariffs will also be higher than what ECG charges. And the argument is that, why don't you give ECG the same opportunities that you're giving whoever is coming to take over ECG? Because then they could equally also perform.
It means that they just have also to up tariffs so that they can accrue enough revenue.
They are free to put it wherever they feel they should, because they need a lot of money to, make ECG better. So we thought that we would engage one person whose institution has also been on this subject for quite a while now. Dr. Steve Mantera is joining us via phone. He's the campaign coordinator of ISODEC on this subject. Hello, sir. Good morning. We thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning, and my regards to your cherished listeners.
Sure. So the fact that a lot of people are interested in taking over ECG, that should be good news, right?
Well, it also tells you that ECG is a profitable venture, and that if we take steps to put it on good fortune, the country that we can be ultimate beneficiary. I believe that what is about to happen is a transfer of public monopoly into a private monopoly, which for me is more dangerous for this country.
You've been on a campaign to get all of us as Ghanaians to be against this privatization, but as you can see, we are well ahead into the move to privatize it. ECG needs a lot of money, and if somebody is ready to provide that kind of money to push into ECG, should Ghanaians be excited about that?
Well, that precisely should be the focus of the public debate around the future of ECG. ECG needs a lot of money. How much does ECG need? The last time I checked, ECG needs about $350 million to be able to improve its service. $350 million. Now, if you look at how much government and its agencies owe ECG, it's about somewhere in the region of $500 million. Which means if government were to make good its indebtedness to ECG, the capital requirement that ECG needs to improve its services will be obtained without necessarily bringing in a strategic investor.
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
So you've seen, I remember that sometime last year you were asking for full disclosure. What have you seen in these agreements? Should ECG be taken over? What will be different?
Well, there hasn't been full disclosure as I requested sometime last year. but I have managed to lay hands on some documents, which I'm still studying. What I find quite interesting is that there was a feasibility study that was undertaken by the U.S. Army Corps, and it contains some interesting details. One of them is the fact that in this whole arrangement, we are hiving off rural electrification from the concessioneering arrangement so that whoever takes over ECG will not have a responsibility to extend electricity to the rural area. That makes it quite lucrative. Then they are able, but you know that in rural areas, incomes are low, and therefore the default rates are likely to be higher. And that is one way in which we are ensuring that that strategic investor is able to recoup his investment and make enough profit. That's a bad deal. If it were possible to take that responsibility of ECG, why didn't you take it off his shoulders? And why does that become the basis, part of the basis for assessing the efficiency of ECG?
One other thing is also the fact that this new person who would eventually take over can increase electricity tariffs, correct?
Exactly. I've heard some government officials say that this will drive down prices. The only thing that is likely or potentially could drive down prices is competition. ECG is not going to be in competition with anybody. So how would that drive down prices? Secondly, the concessionaire anticipates to make a certain return on its investment. And that means that particular return can only come about through increases in tariffs. And this government has guaranteed the concessionaire. Indeed, government has committed to pay all its debt that it owes ECG before the concessionaire takes over it.
Dr. Mate, I just hung on for Roland Walker, who is my co-host this morning. Roland.
You were mentioning the issue of what the markup will be as far as pricing is concerned, which will have a certain reflection on the tariffs that will be charged by whoever the concessionaire is or is coming to take over the facility. When we look at the bulk of distribution in Ghana and then the sectional areas in which the distribution is done and affordability of the tariffs, do you think we could come to a certain point where we have a private concessionaire, and so that will have an influence on affordability or perhaps pricing?
I didn't get the import of the question. Can you come again, please?
We have a bulk of people in our country who are consumers, but perhaps may not be able to pay a certain level of pricing. I'm saying if the private sector entity comes in to take over the ECG, in which that could have an influence on pricing, how can we factor in the mix of the consumers who perhaps may not be able to pay?
Well, that becomes a subject of government policy. Government always has a responsibility to kind of prevent the weak, the vulnerable in society from falling through the cracks of economic policy making. And so if that becomes the case, I guess government can intervene with lifeline tariffs and also with some subsidies to cushion the poor from this concession. But that would depend on government's own financial state and its capacity to be able to undertake that initiative.
Well, that's critical, though. If government owes ECG, the sums that we're told that government owes ECG, and also because ECG has not been able to do a replacement of his stock of equipment, so to speak, doesn't it make then more a logical sense that a private sector entity could come in with more innovative ideas than we've been practicing all these decades? And,
I mean, where is the need for innovation here? You owe a company, the company is collapsing, and you have the wherewithal, if you do, because they are actually committed to settle their debts before the concessionaire takes over. Then why didn't you do that for ECG so they could be efficient? Secondly, we are talking privatization here. And let me say that we seem to be obsessed with a certain form of privatization, which is strategic investor. But we have also tried some other forms of privatization in this country that have actually been successful, but more successful than any other form of privatization we've ever done in this country. And that is floating the stocks of ECG to Ghanaians on the stock exchange. If that were to happen, then Ghanaians become the owners of their electricity company, and they dictate who should manage and how it should be managed. Now, we've experimented that with the Ghana Commercial Bank at the time when they were in dire need of investment. We floated Ghana Commercial stocks on the stock exchange, and it was oversubscribed. Today, Ghana Commercial Bank is a profit-making venture. We also tried with the State Insurance Corporation. Today, its shares was also oversubscribed, and today is a very profitable concern. So the point I'm making is that if we need to invest in ECG, let's give the right of first refusal to Ghanaians. Let Ghanaians begin to own their own assets and dictate how it should be managed. If a management is not delivering, they have the mandate at AGM then to change that management and replace it with a more efficient management.
We're in a part of Africa which gives an indication that as far as the sub-Saharan context is concerned, the issue of pricing always becomes a political issue. For you as an entity, it doesn't then feed into the whole narrative of taking advantage of what the current situation is and saying that privatization is not good?
No, it's everything about our economic life is going to be on autopilot, where rates or prices are determined automatically, then we don't need any government. But it is precisely because there will be the need to intervene to ensure that public services are accessible to the majority of your people. That is why we are government. And that is why under the social contract, we all contribute taxes to the government, not to pay themselves salaries for doing nothing, but sometimes to use part of the taxes to cushion the poor against some of these actions that come about as a result of the interplay of market forces.
Very interesting point you make there. But when you do further reading and you look at available literature, there have been some successful stories to tell as far as this very venture or journey we even want to embark on.
That is a total lie. Indeed, I'm aware there's been some examples elsewhere, but all those places that you can pinpoint, these are places where the introduction of concessionaire arrangements were done on pilot basis. They are still ongoing, and it's early days here to determine whether or not it will return the needed benefits to the state. And I see no reason why in all the places that they are trying to implement these initiatives, they are doing it on pilot basis, and in Ghana, we are doing it on a full-scale basis.
Well, that's an interesting point you make as well. And so how further would you take this whole initiative to make sure that there's some level of reason seen in the arguments that you're making as a civil society group?
Of course, we will continue to keep the issue under scrutiny, and whatever we find, we make public. We've been able to lay hands on some confidential communications around this deal, and also some documents that could better inform our analysis. And as soon as it becomes necessary, we'll put these things out based on what the findings of analysis will be.
And before we let you go, who stands to benefit most in this very deal? Which side of the divide?
Of course, the concessionaire, and that is why you see a lot of interest. 62 countries, 62 companies bidding to get a share of this booty. That's it. They stand to gain, and that is why there is a smart rush for ECG.
Because you know there's money there, right?
Of course. If you look at the feasibility report undertaken by the U.S. Corp, it actually guarantees profit. There's no way you will lose out on that. Because anything that constitutes liability or that could be a hindrance towards your achievement of that profit is being removed from the deal, including the responsibility for rural electrification.
Well, I think finally, just before you go, can't ECG take government on? Couldn't they sue them? Because if I owed ECG, such huge amounts, they would have taken me to court.
Well, there's this saying that he who pays the piper calls the tune. Let the leadership of ECG take that step, and you see that the head will be changed. Okay, so there is always a fear that, well, how do I take the person who appointed me on? Because taking government on means taking on. And that is why I believe strongly that we need to look at ways in which we can dilute the ownership of ECG to limit government interference and government's control over the entity, and not to give it to vultures, so-called strategic investors who actually come and invest very little and take many-fold their investments away.
All right, sir. We appreciate your time with us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this particular conversation. That's Dr. Steve Mantea, his campaign coordinator of ISODEC. And we don't know what you think about this conversation. For a lot of people, around, this was like 4:30 this morning, the light went out. Was it 4:30 or 4:45? So if somebody said to me, I mean, a lot of us believe that ECG is inefficient. Sometimes they do things that you're not even surprised anymore. I mean, you say, okay, yeah, that's ECG, right? We expect it. So if you say somebody who is competent or a lot more competent is coming, the ordinary person would not object to it, Roland, would you? Because you are saying that you have issues right now. You don't know if it's your meter or is the increment or whatever it is. There are people who have faulty meters that the ECG is not changing, you know? So if somebody is coming, would you? Because I feel that a lot of Ghanaians would not care once they are assured that whoever is coming in will be more efficient than the current ECG.
Well, true. For the ordinary consumer, anything that will provide some level of manna from heaven, so to speak, that would ensure there's consistency of supply, then they would very much go in for it, though it will be a certain buy-in. But I believe that from the side or the criticism from civil society, especially the ISODEC and those that are interested in it, is because of the precedent that has been set around the world. And even in Ghana, we did some level of concessionary privatization as far as management was concerned for our water. And Aquavitans Rand came into the country.
And
it was
look
not too successful.
And
because energy is very expensive, it's very, very expensive around the world. If an entity invests in it, they would want to recoup. And for the private sector, everything that is done is to make sure there's rationalization, that there are cost-cutting measures, and then there's profits. So the end consumer, which is the masses, who are the masses, tend to bear the brunt of these increments as a result of the cost-cutting measures, the need to make sure that the operational overheads are so low or within manageable limits, so that everybody is very much satisfied on the side. We haven't tried for energy, so we don't know how it's going to be. But the practices around the world doesn't give us something for us to be comfortable about. Not at all.
That's true.
If the economy was perhaps equitable as far as income levels are, then we can say that people can earn and they can pay. So there'll be no problems at all. Because we shouldn't say that energy is privatizing the best of the developing world. No. Of the developed world. It's not, or it's not nationalizing the best of the developed world. No, it's most of the time quasi or partially privatized. So they have developed economies that would ensure that people have the needed capital to pay. We are not in that very state yet. My concern is for the rural masses or those who fall within the brackets that don't earn enough to pay. If that happens, what do we do? We'll get back to that state where government will say, I want to subsidize for them. You produce your power, produce it at this very rate. I will subsidize. And then they can't pay when the economy is bad.
It will become fuel.
So we'll go back to a certain cycle which we've experienced before.
We should get the document that Dr. Steve Mantea has. It will probably tell us a lot more, because I'm interested in, so who will be responsible for rural electrification? whose responsibility would it be then? I guess it will be the
because
Power
because
Ministry or
they all
Energy
do.
Ministry.
We all don't get. They don't get the same rates that we do.
No,
Yes.
no, they don't.
And it's
Yeah.
it's acceptable and it's understandable.
It's true.
We'll see how that happens.
Well, you can send your views on this. Send us a WhatsApp message on 0560 800,000 and also go to Joy News on TV. But there's a linking story in the Daily Graphic of today. PRC to penalize ECG. And I don't know, like the PRC, they go and sleep and then they come back and they fire one as if something will happen. But the story says that the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission has decided to penalize the Electricity Company of Ghana for its failure to replace faulty meters for many of its consumers nationwide or customers. The failure on the part of the ECG has seen several consumers paying above the 59.2% increment, which took effect in December 2015. The situation has seen some angry consumers besieging selected offices of the ECG in parts of the country. The Director of Public Relations and External Affairs at the PRC, Nanaya Jantwa, told the Daily Graphic in Accra yesterday that the Commission was working on the penalty unit to be imposed on the ECG. Now, tell me honestly, as a consumer, if you as a consumer who is having issues with your meter, all the hikes and things like that, are you refreshed hearing the fact that PRC will penalize ECG? Or you're probably just like me, yeah, this is just another talk, because people have real issues on the ground and PRC just comes out and says this is what we want to do, when you know deep in your heart that nothing will happen anyway. Seriously.
Yeah, we're hoping that we can have some finality to the discourse and the disagreements that tend to emerge, especially between the regulator, this one we're talking about the PRC, and those who tend to do the provision or the distribution of energy, etc. It has become more critical because now consumers have become a lot more aware, just as a result of the difficulties they are going through, not getting access to the utilities that they have to, for which they are paying anyway. And so once the consumer has also become very much aware, then they also tend to bring a lot more pressure on the regulator, because you're supposed to regulate them and the consumer is not behaving based on the agreement we have the way it has to. So then it poses a certain and brings a certain responsibility to bear on the regulator. And I believe that the PRC is taking an action which...
I want to see the action. I have no hope in the words, honestly. It's true.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah. When we come back, there was another issue, Roland, that we didn't quite touch on, that you, which was on myjoyonline.com. We'll open that app. We'll come back with a lot more in your comments as well. But by popular request, the inspirational piece that got me tearing that I shared earlier has to come back. So Patrick Gomez, our director on duty this morning, please bring it back. And then we'll come back and share more issues with you here on the show.